9:37 the time. Need to Know is the program. Let's talk a little healthcare this morning. And a statistic that caught my eye. You know that it used to be in America that most Americans used to be covered by commercial health insurance plans. Now, 161 million Americans are receiving health care through the government, through one program or another. That's nearly half the U.S. population, which is 331 million. So nearly half the population is on government-funded health care. And the question is that a trend that's going to continue? And is it indeed sustainable? And a healthcare expert that's one of my go-to guys on topics like this is named Paul Seegert, and Paul is back on the Newsmaker line. Paul, welcome back to Iowa Radio. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So, Paul, first of all, let's talk about the trend. More and more Americans accessing government-funded health care in one form or another. Do you see that continuing?
Well, we've seen surges in the past. During the last big economic downturn, it wasn't as significant as this. We saw about 6 million people added on to Medicaid during that time. But then as the economy rebounds, you can see that some of those folks leave and go back onto the commercial plans at their new employer. I think we'll likely see some of that. It definitely is bigger this time, this effect. We're seeing just under 10 million people joined the Medicaid rolls from February 2020 through January.
Paul, is that a good thing? I mean, at this particular point, more and more people getting on government insurance, is that really sustainable?
Well, it's the federal government can just go out and apparently print money and borrow money and so on. So it's not as tough, although, that's its own conversation. But it's easier mechanically for the federal government to say, let's expand Medicaid. Something we don't talk a lot about is how it impacts states. And you have states, now Medicaid is the largest part of most state budgets. It's approaching about 30% for most of them. So even when the federal government comes in and covers a significant majority of the cost, it still can be a very difficult expense for these states to manage. So from that standpoint, I don't think it really is sustainable. And when you look at the federal government, what they did here is with some of the most recent legislation around these various rescue acts and so on, they borrowed money to subsidize Medicaid expansion, but it's for a limited time. It's only for the next couple of years. So then the question becomes, what do we do after that? If you still have these folks that are expecting these or needing these subsidies.
Well, and Paul, I can amplify on your answer because I'm a former state legislator that used to be in charge of the state budget. And you're absolutely right. In Iowa, there are a lot of things each legislative session that get a lot of media attention, like how much are we going to spend on schools and how much are we going to spend on broadband. And what is not reported all that often, because it just happens year after year, there's no big publicity around it, is one of the biggest increases yearly in the state budget is, state-funded health insurance. So you're exactly right that the difference between the feds and the state is it's finite. In the state, the feds can print money, but we could have a real problem on our hand if the expansion continues, correct?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, if you look at that impact to continue along the line of these state budgets, just from 08 to 18, the average state budget for this area, it went from 21% to 30%. And now it's certainly higher than that with this recent growth. How much can they handle? And not only how much can the states handle, but what do they do with these folks that are on these programs when the federal government perhaps pulls back because their temporary funding is over? And what do they do with these finite dollars? They have to look at other benefits and perhaps consider cutting those. And there's not, we rarely discuss that.
Right. No, you're exactly right. And look, the federal government, again, I'm going to call on my previous experience here. You're exactly right that the federal government is absolutely capable of doing it. They do it all the time where they have grant programs and temporary programs, then pull it back and just say to the state, now it's your issue. We're off to something else. And ultimately, Paul, what worries me is if you have to start rationing dollars, the quality of care declines. Isn't that a reasonable expectation?
Well, without a doubt. I mean, when the ACA kicked in, immediately about half of the doctors in the state that I was in at the time, California, about half of the doctors said, we will not accept these plans. There were various reasons, but certainly one of them was the reimbursement rates to the providers. I mean, you ration, there's only a few ways to ration, line, price. And in the socialized systems, they ration by line. Someone needs health care, they may have to wait for many months to get a surgery that maybe they would only have to wait weeks for here. But we've got a situation now where you're creating two classes of consumers in healthcare. Those that can access the very good providers because they have really good insurance that will compensate the provider well, and those that don't. And we already see that. And now that class of people who has a lesser quality or less ability to access quality health care is topping half of the folks with health care out there.
Yeah. Healthcare expert Paul Seegert, I love how he explains this, and it's always very clear when he talks about the issues that are out there with the healthcare system. Paul, thanks very much. Have a great holiday weekend coming up, and thank you for joining me today.